Okay, the first letter of Peter. So traditionally, Peter the Apostle has been the author of this letter. It's addressed to Christians living in Asia Minor, which is modern Turkey. And for many Christians throughout the world, this letter, I think, would have many resonances because it's written to a persecuted church. And I think in Britain, Christians have an easy time, but in many countries around the world, Christians are being persecuted. And one of the things that Peter emphasizes is that, well, yes, you are being persecuted, but Christ, who you follow, was persecuted also. He holds up Christ as an example. He says this in chapter 2, verse 21. For to this you have been called, because Christ also suffered for you, leaving an example, so that you should follow in his steps. And then in the following text, there's a number of quotations and allusions to what people often called Isaiah 53. Actually, it's Isaiah 52:13 to 53:12. And this is what's called the fourth servant song in Isaiah. And this talks about a suffering servant. And there are a number of quotations from this and allusions to it in what Peter writes. So that free from sins, we might live for righteousness. And then the key words, by his wounds, you have been healed. By his wounds, you have been healed. So that's a quotation from Isaiah 53, verse 5. In fact, those words are actually quoted at the beginning of Mel Gibson's film. That's the best bit of the film, by the way, the quotation from Isaiah 53. I think it's the most wonderful letter. And in fact, for Martin Luther, it was very, very important. It's interesting because when you look at Martin Luther's understanding of the New Testament, he had like three divisions. And in the top division, there was the Gospel of John, the first letter of John, the letters of Paul, and then 1 Peter. So that was in his first division. Then in the second division, you had things like the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Acts of the Apostles. In his third division, you had things like James, Revelation. So for Luther, it was very important. And the striking thing about 1 Peter is that a lot of the theological ideas you have here cohere with those of Paul. So if it was written by Peter, it shows that Peter and Paul were actually agreeing on quite a lot. I don't know whether Peter wrote it. Scholars have pointed to certain problems if Peter was the author, but I never get bogged down in these things. And the great thing about the New Testament is not actually who wrote it, but actually the message it gives. And it's almost as though the New Testament is saying, don't worry about who wrote this, just listen to the message. Because if you get obsessed with who wrote it, you then almost get a sort of, obsession with the lives of the saints and so on.